Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it a million times, wave management is about 80% of top lane. So if you can get wave management down, then you will see so much more success in your play. Honestly, I'd say that wave management is the most important mechanic in the game for top laners specifically to understand if they want to be climbing. If you're looking for more videos covering the basics on top lane or any lane, be sure to check out our website, gameleap.com. There we have videos covering the basics in an easy to follow course format. If you haven't already, go check it out. That being said, let's start to tackle this monster of a topic, wave management, otherwise known as lane management. In this video, I'm going to go as in-depth as possible and try to cover every micro mechanic that I know of that pertains to wave management. I really do think that it's important to understand every aspect of this topic because it is so quintessential to the top lane. Now, there are three main different types of lanes that you can have in League of Legends. These three different lanes are the neutral lane, the freezing lane, and the pushing lane. Every type of lane will fall under one of these different categories, and they're all useful for different things. There are also varying different degrees of how hard a lane is pushing or how hard it's freezing, and various other things. The goal here is to give you as much information that you can apply to every single game, no matter what. Now, starting off with the first type of lane, and this is something that you will see every game, it is called the neutral lane. A neutral lane or a neutral wave occurs when each side has equal amounts of minions. Now, the game is hard programmed to start off with as close to a neutral wave as possible. For this reason, you're going to see a neutral lane every single game no matter what. Typically, as you would think by the name, a neutral lane does not benefit either laner. If left alone, a neutral lane will pick a side and push to it just through raw RNG. However, it is not something that will usually happen because usually there is somebody that will be pushing it either way. Now, players can influence a neutral lane to occur themselves. However, this is only really seen in the mid lane at the highest level of play and not really something that you will see all too much except for one specific condition in the top lane. Now, in the mid lane, you'll see players on either side push to keep a lane neutral in order to maintain pressure on the jungler. Oftentimes, if possible, a mid laner will match the enemy mid laner's shove in order to keep priority in their lane and respond to a jungle fight if it pops up. This is not as applicable to top lane because there are a lot less paths into the jungle or the river, and it's also a lot farther away. As a result, responsiveness from the top laner is just less impactful than responsiveness from the mid laner. This does not mean that player-influenced neutral lanes won't occur in the top lane. On the occasion that one or more players are pushing for a level advantage, a neutral lane may occur. Usually what you will see is one player will have had wave control for the past 2 or 3 waves, but the other player starts to fight for wave control themselves. This is because the player that hasn't had wave control is coming up to a power spike. This is most commonly seen at levels 2, 3, and 6. However, it can happen at any level, so understanding champion level power spikes is very, very important if you want to know when you should or shouldn't back off. The best example that I can think of for player-influenced neutral lanes in the top lane is in the Riven versus Renekton matchup. If the lane is even and both laners are coming up to level 6, they will suddenly play very aggressive on the wave. They will both look to push the wave as quickly as possible for level 6 without using their cooldowns. As a result, both players will start focusing the minions and sort of ignoring the enemy champions. As soon as one of the players pops 6, they will begin their all-in. If done perfectly, this will almost always result in a kill. This is the main benefit of mastering pushing for a neutral lane. It is also one of the best ways to secure a lead for yourself if you don't have one. If you're able to master pushing for a neutral lane when you haven't had wave control for the majority of the game, then you will be able to get yourself back into a lot of losing lanes. Now, the most important thing that you need to know about a neutral lane is it is only useful for players who don't have wave control. If you do have wave control, setting up a freeze is just better. You will only be looking to create a neutral lane if the enemy is trying to shove the wave into you and you suddenly have a moment to contest that. Likewise, you can't create a neutral lane if the wave is already pushing to the enemy. You need to hard reset the lane by pushing into the tower, or the enemy needs to push the wave back into you. A neutral wave will also occur on one more specific condition, and this is if you push the lane to the tower and then proxy the next wave. This creates a neutral lane because while your creeps are dying to the enemy tower, you're killing the enemy creeps. That means that all of the creeps on both sides are completely dead and the next wave is still walking to the lane. This resets the wave and will prevent you from being able to create a freeze on the next one. So if you are looking to start a freeze, don't proxy the next wave and just leave it at the tower. I would generally recommend only killing the next wave of creeps if you are needing it for a specific item power spike. You can also do it if you are going to be unable to create a freeze due to the champion played. For example, if you're playing Renekton and you're going to be rushing Tiamat, then it's fine to just kill the creeps under the tower since your Tiamat's going to push the wave anyways. Speaking of freezing a lane, let's move on to the frozen lane and why it is the most important lane for a top laner to know if they want to build a massive lead on the enemy top laner. Freezing, ironically, is the mechanic that the top laner Flame used the most in order to create 100 CS leads on enemy top laners in professional play. For this reason, having 100 CS up on the enemy top laner by the 20-minute mark is called the Flame Horizon. I'm going to teach you right now exactly how Flame does this and how you can also do it in order to create massive CS leads. Keep in mind, this can't be done on most champions that build Tiamat, as you're going to be unable to create freezes on those, and some champions like Singed, for example, are just not going to be able to create freezes. So this does have certain exceptions that can't freeze. If you don't have Balmy Cinder or a Tiamat, or you're not playing an auto-pushing champion, then look to freeze because it is so good. Now there are so many ways to create a freeze, and a lot of it is just you getting creative, and I can't cover every single way to create a freeze in this video since I probably don't even know every single way. There are so many different ways, and a lot of it requires you to just get creative. There are times when I'm playing in solo queue and I see the enemy top laner do something just strange, and I'll have no clue why they did it. For example, one time I was holding a freeze of my own playing against a Kennen, and that Kennen walked away from the wave, proxied 2 waves to force me to crash his minions into my tower. He was able to do this because I wasn't able to tank the wave yet, I was only level 5. This resulted in him being able to base and then come back to a freeze of his own. Now whether or not this was practical for the Kennen or if he even got a lead from it, I don't know. But I do know it was one of the most creative things I've ever seen in a game, and it resulted in a freeze for him in a situation that was looking doomed. Now I didn't tell you this to go recommend you to go start proxying waves on the enemy laner when they're freezing on you. I just wanted to get the point across that there are so many ways to freeze aside from what you've already probably heard. Let's start with the best and most effective way to start a freeze. Now this is really simple. All you have to do is shove the wave into the tower and leave the next wave alone. If you crash a wave into the tower and leave the next wave, what will happen is the next wave will group on your minions while they're dying to the tower, and your minions will not be focusing the enemy minions. This means that the enemy minions are stopped under their tower while not losing any HP. As a result, once all of your minions from the previous wave have finished dying, the next wave will meet at a location closer to the enemy's turret. This allows the next wave of enemy minions to reach where the minions are fighting faster, therefore killing your minions faster and resulting in a numbers advantage for the enemy minions. This means that the wave will then slowly push to you, allowing you to control it and keep it frozen for as long as you want. The general rule of thumb in order to keep a freeze is you want the enemy's wave to have 3 more ranged creeps than you have. This will allow you to keep the wave pushing towards you as long as possible. You also want to prevent the creeps from getting too close to your tower, otherwise the tower will start hitting them, therefore breaking your freeze. Players like Flame abuse this mechanic to create massive leads on the enemy top laner by standing in between the frozen wave and the enemy top laner. By doing this, you're able to zone the enemy top laner from CSing, only needing to back off when an additional wave starts to crash into the existing waves. As a result, the enemy top laner will only be able to CS 1 out of every 6 creeps usually, and you will be able to CS all of the creeps. By abusing this mechanic and keeping the windows of opportunity that the enemy top laner has for CSing as small as possible, you can easily hit plus 100 CS in 20 minutes. Now you might be thinking, well, what happens if the enemy top laner is doing this to me and I'm having my wave frozen on me? Now this is a great question, and the only thing that I can say will work 100% of the time is call your jungler up and ask them to break the freeze with you. Now they might be confused at first and think you're asking for a gank, so if they aren't coming, type, hey, help me, I need to push this wave. Most of the time the jungler will not turn that offer at some EXP and gold down, so they should help you break the freeze as it's beneficial for everyone involved. Now if you are playing at the highest echelon of play, then it is a possibility that the enemy jungler comes to stop you from breaking a freeze, but that's really something you don't need to worry about until about Grandmaster or Challenger level. For anything lower than that, I'd say this is guaranteed to work unless the enemy top laner can 1v2 kill both of you. If this is the case though, fixing the freeze wouldn't even help because the enemy top laner is likely also going to be able to just dive you. Now, the higher rated you get, the longer you will be able to hold an impactful freeze. In lower ratings, you're going to have to break the freeze sooner because grouping occurs sooner in lower elos. Once both teams start to group, that is your cue to stop freezing and start slow pushing instead. If you pair freezing and slow pushing together, you can impact the map more than the enemy top laner while still creating massive CS leads on the enemy top laner. That being said, let's get into how to create a slow push and when you should be abusing slow pushing. Now, if you're remembering the number one rule on keeping a freeze, then just think, well, if the opposite of a freeze is a slow push, then what's the opposite of the number one rule for a freeze? That's right, the number one rule for a slow push is make sure the enemy wave has 3 less minions than your wave. Now the number 2 rule for a slow push is make sure it doesn't turn into a freeze. Creating a slow push is great for pressuring the map, however, if you do it at the wrong time, the enemy top laner is just going to freeze that wave and build a CS lead on you. As a result, slow pushing is only useful if the enemy tower is down. If the enemy tower isn't down yet, then it's best to just hard push the wave because a wave is not going to have the time to build up if the tower is still up. It's going to crash too soon, and as a result, you're only going to have about 3 additional minions than you would normally have hitting the tower. It won't result in any meaningful pressure or tower damage. The benefit of slow pushing a wave is that you can get 3 or even 4 waves to crash into a tower, dealing massive amounts of damage and forcing one player on the enemy team to go deal with that crashing wave. If the wave doesn't have the time to build up, it will never be impactful. You should also not be slow pushing a wave if there's no reason to be grouping. If there is no objective that your team wants to be 5-man grouped on, then there's no point in leaving the lane while slow pushing it. It's better in that case to just stay in the lane and hard push it yourself, that way you can get as much gold and EXP as possible. A slow push is something you want to create when you need to group with your team. Let me give you an example of the perfect time to create a slow push. It's 30 minutes into the game and Baron has spawned. The game is relatively even and the enemy top laner does not have teleport. What you want to do is you want to prep a slow push in the bot lane. Once you start the slow push, just by making sure your wave has 3 more creeps than the enemy wave, you go and group with your team. The longer the slow push exists, the more minions you will have crashing into that enemy tower. As a result, the closer the minions get to the enemy tower, the more pressure will be exerted, forcing the enemy top laner to go deal with it. This is your chance to make a play at Baron. Either do the Baron or go for a pick when it is a 5v4 for your team. If the enemy top laner still refuses to deal with that wave, it is also a possibility to teleport onto that wave and just take the tower for yourself. This is something you should be careful while doing though, because it will result in a 5v4 for the enemy team on Baron. If this is not something you can afford to do, then just keep in mind, just tower damage is beneficial towards you, Also, you lose less than the enemy top laner because that wave will then start pushing to you after the tower kills all the creeps. The most important thing with this is do not get impatient. If you get impatient and you go to the slow push, then you've completely wasted the point of creating a slow push. The main idea behind a slow push is to create a pressure without having to commit a member of the team to that lane. Going to that lane defeats the purpose. If you are committing yourself to a lane, then it's better just to hard push. Hard pushing is very self-explanatory. All you do is you kill the minions as quickly as possible and you hit towers. If the enemy top laner is staying in the lane that you're already in, then you might not be able to hit the tower, but at least you're able to crash waves into the tower and draw some sort of pressure. Your main goal while hard pushing should be one of two things. Either one, get tower damage and as much of it as possible, or number two is to draw another member of the enemy team towards you so there are two people dealing with you instead of one. Typically you want to hard push waves into towers if you have teleport advantage and the enemy top laner isn't able to deal with you. This allows you to be the first one to teleport, and it will also mean that you lose less for teleporting. If you don't have TP, then the only thing that you should be looking to do when hard pushing is drawing an additional member of the enemy team toward you. This allows your team to have a numbers advantage on the opposite half of the map while you're split pushing. This can allow them to take towers, dragons, rift heralds, baron, whatever it is that the objective might be. Hard pushing should only be utilized on the opposite half of the map that the main action is going on in. If you hard push top lane while Baron is up, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get 5-man top lane and then they're going to do Baron. You don't want to create that window of opportunity for the enemy team. The hardest part about hard pushing is knowing what lane that you need to be in while doing it. Another thing to keep in mind is just because you are hard pushing the wave does not mean you need to be insanely aggressive. Remember, your only goal is to draw additional people towards you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fight them. So many times I'll see a Jax or a Tryndamere or Fiora hard push into towers over and over and over again, and then get 3-manned over and over and over again, and they'll just die. That is not the goal here. You want to draw people towards you without actually dying. Remember, the longer you keep them there, the better. And dying means that they can just go to wherever the action's happening right after they kill you. If you are trying to learn how to hard push, I would recommend watching the streamer Fogged for the Win. He's a challenger top laner on the NA server, and he has one of the best Tryndameres in the world. He has completely mastered this mechanic, and I would recommend checking him out if you want to see a master utilize this. There's a lot more that you can learn just from watching him than I could ever give you in a 10 to 20 minute video. Now, the last thing that I want to cover is if you find yourself getting hard pushed in late game. There is not much you can do if this is the case except to clear the wave. If you're not able to fight the enemy top laner, then you can't contest them for wave control late game, so you just need to let it happen and clear the wave as quickly as possible so they get as little tower damage as possible. Remember, the most important thing here is not dying, and that goes for both sides of the hard push. Stay alive and allow your team to pressure the map for you. If you're lucky, your team can make a play, therefore forcing the enemy top laner to go group with their team, giving you some breathing room. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. I know a lot of you guys requested this, so I wanted to cover everything that I know about wave management. If you haven't checked out our website yet, GameLeap.com, go ahead and check it out. We have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, organized into a quick and easy to use course system. We have courses for the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion-specific courses. So if you have something specific in mind that you want to learn all about, go ahead and check out some of our courses on the website. As usual, I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.